latest development on the Dutch takeover of Chinese owned semiconductor chip manufacturer Nexperia, which is based in the Netherlands.
Dispute between the Netherlands and China over the control of the chip maker Nexperia is threatening to disrupt global.
No one could have imagined that a quiet regulatory move in the Netherlands would trigger one of Europe's most intense trade crises in decades. Late in September, inside government offices in The Hague, Dutch officials made a decision whose consequences would reach far beyond their borders. The Netherlands announced plans to take control of Nexperia, a major microchip manufacturer owned by China's Wingtech technology. The official justification was national security. But what followed revealed something much deeper: the fragility of a global industrial system built on tightly interwoven supply chains. Within days, what seemed like a domestic legal matter began shaking industries from Europe's automotive centers to Asia's electronics hubs. What started as a technical policy move quickly evolved into a geopolitical confrontation, one that threatened the very core of Europe's manufacturing power. Nexperia isn't just another chip company. Its semiconductors are vital components in everything from cars and smartphones to renewable energy grids. The company's products are woven into countless supply chains that keep modern economies running. That's why the Dutch government's decision caught so many analysts off guard. On September 30th, The Hague invoked the long-dormant Goods Availability Act, a Cold War-era law allowing the state to seize private enterprises in times of emergency. It hadn't been used since 1952. When the order came down, markets reacted instantly. For Beijing, this wasn't about legal oversight, it was about control. Chinese authorities condemned the move as an act of economic aggression. Dutch officials defended themselves, claiming their hand was forced by internal issues at Nexperia, including alleged irregularities and reports of $200 million in missing funds. They insisted the intervention was necessary to safeguard Europe's chip supply from external manipulation. Yet, the timing raised eyebrows. For months, Washington had been urging its allies to curb Chinese tech influence and reduce reliance on Beijing's semiconductor ecosystem. To many observers, the Dutch government's sudden action looked less like an isolated decision and more like a coordinated move aligned with US policy. Beijing's response was immediate and fierce. Within days, China's Ministry of Commerce suspended all microchip exports from Nexperia's Chinese factories. What began as a legal dispute had morphed overnight into a trade weapon. The export ban included key components, transistors, control units, and other vital parts used in vehicle braking systems, batteries, and power grids, the backbone of modern industry. European automakers were hit almost immediately. Because Nexperia's production network was deeply globalized, chips made in Europe were often tested and packaged in China before returning for final assembly. When China sealed the loop, production lines faltered. Factories across Germany, France, and Italy began redrawing schedules. Engineers warned that even short delays could bring entire assembly lines to a standstill. The European Automobile Manufacturers Association publicly cautioned that most factories had less than a month's worth of semiconductor reserves. Within the industry, uncertainty turned to alarm. For the first time since the post-pandemic recovery, Europe faced the real possibility of large-scale production shutdowns, not due to raw material shortages, but because of a political standoff over a single company. China's export ban wasn't just symbolic, it was surgically precise. It demonstrated Beijing's ability to disrupt industries not through tariffs or sanctions, but by controlling the lifelines of global manufacturing. Containers filled with components began stacking up in Shanghai's ports. European suppliers scrambled to find alternatives, but the shockwaves quickly spread beyond the auto sector. Electronics producers, energy system manufacturers, and even defense contractors began reviewing their dependencies. The crisis made Europe's reliance on China painfully clear. Then, on October 23rd, another blow landed. Nexperia's Shanghai division, one of its largest production hubs, declared it would no longer recognize directives from its Dutch headquarters. This announcement came after European management attempted to dismiss John Chan, Nexperia's vice president for global sales and marketing. Chinese executives refused, arguing that the order violated local labor laws and held no legal authority in China. Their statement left no room for interpretation. The Shanghai branch would no longer obey European commands. Markets were stunned. What had started as a government takeover in the Netherlands now resembled a full-blown corporate split. Two halves of the same company were operating under different legal systems, backed by opposing governments. Nexperia had effectively fractured, a mirror of the growing East-West divide in global technology and trade. Roughly 70% of Nexperia's total chip output came from its Chinese facilities. With exports frozen, billions of dollars worth of products were trapped inside China, unable to reach global customers. Meanwhile, European factories dependent on those chips were forced to slow down or halt production altogether. Major suppliers scrambled to adapt. Francis Vallejo, a key automotive parts maker serving Volkswagen, BMW, and Stellantis, announced it had already sourced replacements for most affected semiconductors. The news offered temporary relief to investors, but it also underscored the scale of the disruption. Europe's automotive industry was being rebuilt in real time. Every replacement required new contracts, compatibility checks, and retooled assembly lines. The pace of the crisis was unlike anything in recent memory. For many economists, the Nexperia dispute marked a turning point, a shift from corporate governance to geopolitical confrontation. It was no longer about business management, but about which governments controlled the arteries of global industry. The West's decision to expropriate a Chinese-owned tech firm underscored its fear of over-reliance on foreign technology. Beijing's retaliation, meanwhile, showed its confidence that Europe could not function without Chinese components. Both sides had tested the limits, and both had learned just how deeply entangled their economies truly are. By early November, Europe's largest automaker, Volkswagen, issued an internal memo warning that disruptions linked to Nexperia could affect production across several of its brands. Given the rapidly changing environment, short-term impacts on production cannot be ruled out, the document stated. For a company overseeing more than 10 brands and employing hundreds of thousands of workers, even small interruptions carried billion-dollar consequences. In Germany, the National Automobile Association, VDA, confirmed that its members had received an official notice from Nexperia, warning that the company could no longer guarantee deliveries. Japan's Automobile Manufacturers Association released similar statements, noting that the shortage might impact Toyota, Nissan, Honda, and Mazda. In the United Kingdom, the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders called the situation a critical blow to an industry already under strain. For companies facing mounting tariffs, falling sales, and intense competition from Chinese electric vehicle makers, this new supply shock struck at the very heart of Europe's industrial identity. Assembly lines that once represented precision and reliability suddenly looked vulnerable to political decisions made thousands of miles away. And behind every delayed shipment or halted production line lay a deeper problem. Europe's dependency on foreign supply chains had reached a dangerous tipping point. The Nexperia crisis exposed decades of economic complacency. For years, Europe had relied on a globalized model, low-cost manufacturing abroad, advanced engineering at home, and seamless logistics connecting the two. It was a system that thrived in times of peace and cooperation. But as geopolitical rivalries deepened, that framework began to crack. Now, with China controlling much of the world's chip assembly and key raw materials, Europe was coming face to face with the limits of its own strategy. The numbers told the story clearly. Nearly 90% of the rare earth metals imported by the European Union, crucial for electric motors, sensors, and batteries, came from China. In September, Beijing's export data showed a 31% drop in shipments of these materials, tightening the squeeze on European manufacturers. Every ton withheld meant fewer vehicles completed, fewer wind turbines finished, and fewer electronic systems delivered. What began as a dispute over microchips had turned into a full-scale test of industrial endurance. Inside corporate boardrooms and government offices, the focus shifted from short-term fixes to existential questions. Could Europe rebuild its own supply chains quickly enough to regain control over production? Could it protect its economic security without shutting itself off from global trade? And perhaps most urgently, could it operate independently from the very nation whose resources it still relied on? The Dutch government maintained that seizing Nexperia was a matter of principle, a step to protect national interests in an increasingly unstable world. But across Europe, many saw it as the beginning of a difficult reckoning. Economic sovereignty, it turned out, came with a price. To rebuild its semiconductor capacity, Europe would need to invest billions in new foundries, train a new generation of engineers, and compete head-to-head with Asia's established tech giants. At the same time, each escalation risked provoking new retaliation from China, adding to the uncertainty. In response, the European Commission began drafting emergency measures to shield key industries from external shocks. Plans were introduced to diversify supply chains towards Southeast Asia and Africa, while funding for domestic semiconductor production was accelerated under the European Chips Act. Still, these ambitious initiatives would take years to deliver tangible results. Until then, manufacturers remained exposed to the turbulence of global politics. In China, the crisis became a rallying cry. State media framed the Dutch seizure of Nexperia as proof of Western hypocrisy. Nations that preached free market values, now confiscating foreign-owned companies. Commentators argued that China's technological progress could no longer be contained by external restrictions. Rather than backing down, Beijing doubled down on its pursuit of technological independence, investing heavily in chip design and materials science. In a symbolic move, the Chinese government imposed new export licensing requirements for gallium and germanium, two critical elements used in advanced electronics. So, has Europe stepped into a confrontation it never fully understood? A battle that could redefine the global economic order for years to come? Tell us what you think in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the Timefold channel for more insights into the stories shaping our world.